There will be 7 years of pain to all the Gentile nations combined. This 7 years of pain is great tribulation to the Gentiles and the nations of the Gentiles. And this 7 years of pain to all the Gentile nations is recorded in Daniel chapter 4, verses 16, 23, 25, and 32. The 7 years of pain of great tribulation to the Gentiles is recorded 4 times in one chapter. And while the Gentiles and the nations of the Gentiles are going through their 7 years of pain of great tribulation to the Gentiles, there will be 7 years of mercy to the Israelites recorded in Revelation 12, verse 6 and 14. Therefore, the 7 years of pain of great tribulation goes to all the nations of the Gentiles combined, and the 7 years of mercy goes to the descendants of the house of Jacob, of the 12 Israelite tribes of Israel, where Revelation 12, verses 6 and 14 represents 7 years of mercy and safety to the 12 Israelite tribes of Israel, the seed of Jacob. Let it also be known that the Gentiles that cleave to the house of Jacob will also receive mercy and safety with the 12 Israelite tribes, to whom the 7-year covenant of mercy is given. Therefore, the Gentiles that are given mercy by the Most High and accepted by Yahushua, who cleave to the house of Jacob, will receive 7 years of mercy and safety with the Israelites. And the Gentiles who cleave not to the house of Jacob will receive 7 years of pain of great tribulation to the Gentiles. Daniel 4 records 4 times in one chapter the fall of the kingdom and rulership of the Gentiles. Again, to the 12 tribes of Israel, the number 4 in Daniel chapter 4 represents 4 times in one chapter the end of the times and the kingdoms and the rulership and the power and the glory of the Gentiles over a 7-year period of great tribulation to the Gentiles and the nations of the Gentiles, the end of the Gentile kingdom. So with that understanding that Daniel 4 records 4 times the end of the times and the kingdoms and the rulership and the power and the glory of the Gentiles over a 7-year period of great tribulation to the Gentiles, let's bring it out. The truth of the Most High Yahweh. Daniel 4, verse 16. And let 7 times pass over him. 1 time equals 1 year. Therefore, 7 times equals 7 years, which is referencing 7 years of great tribulation to the Gentiles and all the nations of the Gentiles combined. Now, in order for us to acquire a more detailed understanding of verse 16, we will start with verse 10. Thus were the visions of mine head in my bed. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof was great. To the Israelites, the tree in verse 10 represents the wild olive tree of the Gentiles and the nations of the Gentiles, recorded in Romans 11. The wild olive tree of the Gentiles and the nations of the Gentiles grew and was strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof to the end of all the earth. Verse 11 represents the Gentile kingdom of heaven on earth, and the kingdom and the rulership and the power and the glory of the Gentiles in the times of the Gentiles. Verse 11 is talking about a Gentile kingdom of heaven on the earth. Verse 12, the leaves of the Gentile kingdom of heaven on earth thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it the Gentile kingdom of heaven on earth was meat for all. The beasts of the field represents all the nations of the Gentiles combined, where the beasts are the Gentile nations, and the field is the world. The beasts, the Gentile nations of the field of the world, had shadow under it, the Gentile kingdom of heaven on earth. And the fowls of the heaven dwelt in the boughs thereof, and all flesh was fed of it. The fowls of the heaven are the Gentile kings and queens and leaders and rulers and government officials and presidents and prime ministers and movie stars and famous Gentiles that are rulers of the people and rulers of the whole earth, who are the fowls of the kingdom of heaven of the Gentiles on the earth. Verse 12 represents the Gentiles enjoying the riches and fatness of the earth. Verse 13, I saw in the visions of my head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher and an holy one came down from heaven. Verse 13 represents Yahushua cracking the sky in his rapture resurrection, where Yahushua came down from heaven. Verse 14, he, Yahushua, cried aloud and said, thus, cut down the tree and cut off his branches, shake off his leaves and scatter his fruit. Let the beasts get away from under it, and the fowls from his branches. Verse 14 represents the wild olive tree of the Gentiles and the nations of the Gentiles getting cut down, and the branches of the wild olive tree getting cut off, and the leaves of the Gentile tree getting shaken off, and the Gentiles and the nations of the Gentiles scattered among the land. Let the Gentiles get away from under the great olive tree, and the kings of the Gentiles from his branches. Verse 14 represents the wild olive tree losing power. Verse 15, nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass, in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Verse 15 represents the stump of the wild olive tree being left in the earth, which is a portion of the Gentile kingdom remaining for a short while, even with a band of iron and brass. The iron and brass represents the military of the Gentiles. Therefore, the wild olive tree is cut down, with a portion of Gentile power remaining, and the nations will continue to have a military of iron and brass. And let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth, which represents the downfall of the nations of the Gentiles. Let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast's heart be given unto him, which means the Gentiles and nations of the Gentiles is going to go from living like a man to living like a beast for 7 years of great tribulation to the Gentiles. This matter is by the decree of the watchers and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High Yahweh ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it the kingdom of heaven, whether in heaven or on earth, to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the kingdom of heaven on earth, the basis of men. The basis of men is referencing Esau and all the nations of the Gentiles combined, with Esau as king and leader over all the nations of the Gentiles combined, and the Most High Yahweh giving the kingdom of heaven on earth to Esau, the basis of men, and all the nations of the Gentiles combined. To the 12 Israelite tribes, Daniel 4, verses 10 to 17 represents the wild olive tree of the Gentiles and the nations of the Gentiles coming into power and coming out of power at the end of the times, and the kingdoms and the rulership and the power and the glory of the Gentiles and nations of the Gentiles in a 7-year great tribulation to the Gentiles at the end of the world to the Gentiles. Verse 23. And whereas the king, who is the wild olive tree of all the Gentile nations combined, saw a watcher, who are the angels, and an holy one, who is Hamashiach Yahushai, coming down from heaven with his angels, saying, cut the wild olive tree down and destroy it, yet leave the stump of the roots thereof in the earth, even with a military band of iron and brass, in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let the wild olive tree, portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 years of great tribulation to the Gentiles pass over the wild olive tree of all the Gentile nations combined. Verse 25, that they, Yahushai, and his angels, shall drive thee, the wild olive tree, from men, from the Israelites, and thy, the wild olive tree, dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they, Yahushai, and his angels, shall make thee the wild olive tree to eat grass as oxen, and they, Yahushai, and his angels, shall wet thee with the dew of heaven, and 7 times 7 years of great tribulation to the Gentiles shall pass over the wild olive tree, till thou, the wild olive tree, know that the Most High Yahweh ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it the kingdom of heaven, in heaven and on earth, to whomsoever the 12 Israelite tribes he will. Verse 25 is saying that Yahushai and his angels is going to take the kingdom of heaven on earth away from the Gentiles, and give the kingdom of heaven in heaven and on earth to the 12 Israelite tribes of Israel. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven on earth, of the kingdoms and the rulership and the power and the glory of the Gentiles, is taken away from the Gentiles at the end of the times of the Gentiles, and the kingdom of heaven in heaven and on earth is given to the Israelites of the 12 tribes of Israel, of the seed of the house of Jacob, at the beginning of the everlasting kingdom and rulership and power and glory of the Israelites. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is taken away from the Gentiles at the end of the times of the Gentiles, and the everlasting kingdom is given to the Israelites at the beginning of the everlasting kingdom of the Israelites. Verse 32, and they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and 7 years of great tribulation to the Gentiles shall pass over the wild olive tree of all the Gentile nations, until thou know that the Most High Yahweh ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it the kingdom of heaven in heaven and on earth, to whomsoever the 12 Israelite tribes he will. Verse 32 is saying the Most High Yahweh is going to take the kingdom of heaven from the Gentiles and give the eternal, everlasting kingdom of heaven in heaven and on earth to the Israelites at the beginning of the Israelite kingdom. Therefore, at the end of the times of the rulership of the Gentiles will lose their kingdom, and the Israelites will gain their eternal, everlasting Israelite kingdom forever and ever and ever by the Most High Yahweh and Hamashiach Yahushai. Revelation 12, verse 6. And the woman, the 12 Israelite tribes, fled into the wilderness in heaven, where she hath a place prepared. Key words: a place prepared of the Most High Yahweh and Hamashiach Yahushai, that they, the Most High Yahweh and Hamashiach Yahushai, should feed her there in heaven 1,260 days, 3.5 years, to the Israelites, while the Gentiles are going through 7 years of great tribulation. In Daniel 4, the woman, the 12 Israelite tribes, are in the wilderness in heaven, in safety, away from our Gentile enemies and the kingdom of darkness on earth. And the precept to Revelation 12, verse 6, where the 12 tribes of Israel are in the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of Yahweh Yahushai, is John 14, verse 2, where the Most High Yahweh and Hamashiach Yahushai has a place in heaven prepared for the 12 Israelite tribes, away from our enemies on earth. Revelation 12, verse 14, and 2, the Israelite woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness in heaven, into her place in heaven prepared by Yahweh Yahushai, where she, the 12 Israelite tribes, is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent, for a time 1 year, and times 2 years, and half a time, and half a year, for a total of 3.5 years of safety to the Israelite woman from the face of the serpent, from the face of Esau and our Gentile enemies, and the kingdom of darkness. Verse 14 is the second half of the 3.5 year period of safety for the Israelites in heaven from the face of our enemies on earth, where our enemy, the serpent, is both in physical and spiritual form. In physical form in Esau and the nations, and in spiritual form by Satan and his kingdom of darkness, where Revelation 12 verse 6 is 3.5 years of safety in the first half of Great Tribulation to the Gentiles, and verse 14 is the second half of 3.5 years of safety to the Israelites from the serpent, who are the nations in the earthly realm, and Satan in the spiritual realm, during the 7 years of Great Tribulation to the Gentiles. Now, regarding the Gentiles, who are not our enemies, that cleave to the house of Jacob, of the 12 Israelite tribes, I'm going to show you how the Gentiles that are not our enemies will fly into the wilderness, into safety with the Israelites. Exodus 12, verse 38, starting at 37. And the children of Israel, of the 12 Israelite tribes. Verse 38, and a mixed multitude, who are the Gentiles that are not our enemies, that cleave to the house of Jacob, of the Most High's chosen Israelite seed, that will be taken up to heaven with the 12 Israelite tribes of the house of Jacob. Therefore, Exodus 12, verse 38 explains how the Gentiles that are not our enemies are taken up to heaven in the wilderness to safety with the Israelites. Numbers 11, verse 4, and the mixed multitude, who are the Gentiles that are not our enemies, that was among them the 12 Israelite tribes of the children of Israel, where verse 4 verifies the Gentiles that are not our enemies among the chosen Israelite seed of Jacob, to the 12 Israelite tribes, to increase our understanding of the mixed multitude. Let us examine the mixed multitude. Hebrew 6:28, where Hebrew 6:28 is referencing the mixed multitude of Gentiles that are not our enemies, but allies of the Israelites in Yahushua, who is the collected multitude of the nations of Gentiles that are gathered up together by Hamashiach Yahushua with the Israelites as a mixed multitude of Gentile allies to the Israelites in Yahushua, who are Gentiles of all nations, who added themselves as allies, who cleaved to the house of Jacob in Yahushua, to the Israelites, which takes us to Revelation 7, verse 9, where the great multitude includes the Gentiles of all nations, who are not our enemies, who cleaved to the house of Jacob of the 12 Israelite tribes in Hamashiach Yahushua, which takes us back to Revelation 12, verses 6, into the wilderness, and verse 14, into the wilderness, for a total of 7 years of safety to the Israelites and the Gentiles that cleave to the house of Jacob as our allies in Yahushua.